This is chapter 35, section 5, and in this section we're going to be talking about drugs in the nervous system and some of the human health implications. Also in class we'll talk about societal implications, sort of the detrimental effects of drugs. And so the way drugs work is that it affects your nervous system and then therefore affects the rest of your body, because your nervous system controls the rest of the functionality of your body. And so this is why we're talking about it in the nervous system chapter. And so we'll talk not only about its effect on the brain and neurons, and how that works, but also how it affects all other functions in the body, both during use and then after use, and long-term effects, detrimental effects and such due to drug use. This should be a fairly quick section, so here we go. Important vocabulary, you need to know this for your quest. Key concepts. And so the definition of a drug is any substance other than food that changes the structure and function of the body. So again, the drug, whatever it might be, both over-the-counter drugs, prescription drugs, and then also illegal substances. These all can be drugs, and this affects your nervous system, which then affects both oftentimes structure and function of your body. And so we have different categories of drugs. The first category we'll talk about is stimulants. So this drug is going to increase any of the actions that are regulated by the nervous system. So this means that it would likely, depending on the drug you're looking at in terms of a stimulant, increase heart rate, increase the blood pressure, increase your breathing rate, this type of function in your body. It's going to increase those. And so it's also oftentimes going to increase the release of neurotransmitters. And so you'll get a sort of an overload of a particular neurotransmitter, which will cause the brain to sort of stimulate other functions in the body much more rapidly and such. Here's some examples of stimulants, and we'll talk more about all of these in class. We'll only get to a few in terms of this PowerPoint. But you can even see here, caffeine is considered a drug. It's also, it's one that's in your coffee or your Coke or Pepsi, and many drinks have caffeine in it. It's considered a drug because it affects the nervous system, which then therefore affects your body's function. And then also nicotine, and we'll talk about other ones such as meth and ecstasy and cocaine and such in class. Depressants decrease the rate of functions regulated by the brain. So it's going to slow down the heart rate. It's going to slow down the breathing rate. It's going to lower the blood pressure. It tends to relax your muscles and relieve tension. And so sort of slows down every function in the body, and that's what a depressant is considered. Here's some examples. You're familiar with some of these. Alcohol you're familiar with. Morphine you're probably familiar with if you've been in a hospital and you've had any sort of severe injury. They're going to give you morphine to kill pain and sort of slow down body's functions. And we'll talk more about heroin in class and such, but morphine and heroin are closely related. So only two more slides. The book goes into a few substances. We're only going to get into two in this PowerPoint section. And so the first one's cocaine that they talk about in the book. And so cocaine is a stimulant, and it's going to release a whole lot of a natural neurotransmitter called dopamine. And so what dopamine does naturally is it produces an intense feeling of well-being and of pleasure and satisfaction. So this is a natural neurotransmitter. However, you're going to get, when you use cocaine, you're going to get a increase of this release of dopamine. It's going to be released suddenly, and so you get a very intense feeling when in use. But then on the other side, after use, you end up coming, as you probably heard, having really low lows because you've had an intense feeling of pleasure, and now it's gone, and so you have a low. Cocaine comes from a plant down in South America. It's called coca, and so these leaves, even if you chew on them, you get some stimulating effect, but they refine this and make it a little bit more potent. But if you notice the word here, coca, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola. If you look at that, there's no coincidence. When Coca-Cola first started, they were putting coca in their beverage. They don't anymore. So that's sort of an interesting fact. Here's some risks that cocaine involves: heart damage, heart attacks, psychological dependence. And these two actually are obviously quite major, heart attack and heart damage. And cocaine's been known to kill on the first try. So people try it for the first time and they have a heart attack and die that first time. And so that's quite unfortunate. In fact, there was a college basketball star that got a first draft pick to the Celtics, I think back in the early 90s. He went to a party, tried cocaine for the first time, and died of a heart attack, never experiencing the NBA in that life. You can get psychological dependence, so your brain wants more of it. You're not physically addicted to it, but you end up wanting to feel that intense pleasure at a higher intensity. So you want more and more of it, and you want a more refined or potent dose of it every single time. And then obviously a risk can be jail. And so if you use or sell cocaine, you can end up in jail for quite some time. The last slide, and the last thing we'll talk about just in this short segment, we'll talk more about other substances in class, but is the opiates. And so this is related to poppies. It is a poppy, and here's the flower. And this is a big trade coming out of Afghanistan in that region of the world. Supplying most of the world is Afghanistan, I believe. And opiates mimic endorphins, a natural chemical in the brain. And this helps you overcome a sensation of pain. And so morphine, what they use in the hospitals, is just an opiate. It's related to heroin. And so it overcomes that sense of pain. And that's why many people use it. It's very dangerous. It's a depressant, and it can cause, with an overdose, it can cause someone to die. In fact, if you know about the singer, well, many singers, many musicians, but from Sublime, this is what he overdosed on, was heroin. It's an opiate depressant. It's highly addictive, and both physically and psychologically. This is why they're careful in hospitals with morphine. They give you a morphine pump, which just basically means it regulates the amount you're able to get at any given moment, and on a timer, so that you don't get too much and then become addicted when you come out of the hospital. So that is opiates. That's section 35. We have more to do, but we'll do some of that in class, and more discussion on how it relates to human health and detrimental in terms of human health and society and such. So we'll talk more about that later. That's chapter 35, section